Well, thank you for having me. I'd like to first say that I greatly admire Colonel Aguilar's bravery and integrity. I don't know if I'd have the same degree of courage that he's exhibited if I were in the same circumstance. And I want to say that I also agree with with Ray McGovern about the danger of the use of nuclear weapons in the Middle East with Israel. That's probably the greatest threat immediately facing us. But I also I want to speak about the dangers of nuclear war with the United States and Russia because we have, 90% or more of the nuclear weapons in the world, and they remain on launch-ready status. Uh, can I share my screen with you all?
Sure. I think you can. Yeah,
Okay.
right ahead.
Well, my contention is that we've already started World War III, that the Ukraine war has evolved into a hybrid form of World War III. It's likely to continue and become nuclear unless we do something to stop it. And I hope all this talk of negotiations is a sign that there's a recognition of that. But my thought is that nuclear deterrence has been failing throughout the course of this war. Russia still remains under constant attack. The Ukraine war is a proxy war that the U.S. and NATO waged against Russia. We talk about Russia negotiating with Ukraine, but the truth is that the war would have ended in a few weeks after it started if the U.S. hadn't stepped in and torpedoed the talks that were about ready to stop the war in March of 2022. Since that time, Russian nuclear early warning radar systems and Russian strategic nuclear bombers have been attacked by drones multiple times. Now, this is unthinkable in the Cold War. We never saw anything like this. The idea that we would attack Russia or the early warning systems would never have happened because of nuclear deterrence. The idea that of mutual assured destruction. There was always a fear that we would have a massive nuclear war if we stepped over these red lines. Um, But we see now that Germany's on the verge of providing Taurus missiles to Ukraine. Of course, they will be operated by German military and guided by U.S. targeting data. And I believe Russia would retaliate against Germany is if this takes place. And so, of course, that would be Germany's a NATO member state. What's important too is we don't really see it in our news, but the Russian infrastructure is still under regular drone attacks. And these attacks require US and or UK targeting data. So Russia is under attack, and we've attacked its strategic nuclear weapons systems, and this is under Russian nuclear doctrine that would be in grounds for nuclear retaliation. They haven't done it yet, but um, in 2024, the three early warning radar sites, Russia has 10 of them. This map shows where they're located. And one of the sites at least suffered very severe damage. Now, Russia relies on these sites to detect a nuclear attack. So this would be viewed by Russian war planners as possibly a preemptive, preparations for a nuclear first strike against Russia. In January of 2025, there was a massive drone attack on a fuel depot the fuel that the Russian strategic bombers require to fly near the Engels Air Force Base. This is a photo of the fuel burning. Again, the U.S. and or the U.K. supplied the targeting data for this, and probably the drones too. What would the U.S. do if Russia supplied drones and they were used to, to the Mexican cartels and they attacked U.S. missile bases or U.S. strategic bombers? In May of 2025, Putin was traveling to Kursk, and there was a massive drone attack that included an attack on his helicopter. Now, in order to do that, the U.S. and the U.K. had to supply the targeting data for the helicopter. What would the U.S. do if drones were used to try to kill Trump, and they were supplied by Russia? And now, this is an image of Russian strategic bombers being attacked by drones. It was a massive attack. It was actually to be carried out against 5 Russian air bases. And under New START, the U.S. and Russia are required to keep their bombers out and open for monitoring purposes. So they used this. They used the Strategic Arms Treaty as a means to attack Russia. This greatly undermines the idea of arms control. And once again, U.S. and U.K. supplied the targeting data for these attacks. At least 3 or 4 bombers were destroyed. Now, throughout the war, drones have been striking Russian oil facilities and infrastructure, and it's knocked out a significant portion, at least say something like 15% of Russian refinery capabilities. This has continued. This video is one that was taken within the last 2 weeks. Imagine if you're a Russian looking out your window, you hear anti-aircraft fire. These are ongoing attacks on Russia that are being guided by U.S. targeting information. The war is continuing. And longer range drones are being employed. They're using AI. So we're not seeing this in the news, but the Russians are seeing it. Okay, what else is going on? Well, there's 51 new U.S. military bases in Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark that are being established right now. There's about an 830-mile border that Finland has with Russia. So on their border, they're seeing all these new bases. Will we put nuclear weapons there? Well, we just returned them to England. And another thing to remind you of that precipitated this crisis, the U.S. had moved ballistic missile defense Aegis Ashore systems to Romania and Poland before the war began. The Russians had called for the removal of these in their draft treaty proposals in 2021 that the U.S. just outright rejected. But these are facilities that use a Mark 41 vertical launch system that can be used to launch Tomahawk cruise missiles that can be nuclear armed. And the Russians have no way of knowing whether or not they're what type of missiles are loaded into the launchers. So what we see now is the U.S. has abrogated basically every arms control treaty that we've had, including the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. And if New START is not renewed in February of next year, there will be thousands of nuclear weapons that will be redeployed, and they can be uploaded because, for example, our subs the Trident missiles can carry up to 12 warheads, but right now under New START, they're limited to 4 or 5. Well, there to be a massive redeployment of warheads. And as I mentioned, we've sent nuclear gravity bombs, the B-61 gravity bombs, to the UK in the last month. And so what does that tell Russia? Germany is poised to accept U.S. ground-launched intermediate-range ballistic missiles in 2026. Dr. Theodore Postel, who's a leading expert on this, has said that these missiles will be nuclear-armed. And he says that Russia will have only 6 to 8 minutes warning time before their warheads would detonate over Moscow. So what the Russians, we're back in the 1980s again, where we had Pershing missiles poised to hit Moscow. Well, in response, Russia has decided to deploy intermediate-range hypersonic Oreshnik missiles to Belarus within the next 5 months. Now, this is a video of the one use of Oreshnik missiles. They come in at something like 10 to 12,000 miles per hour. The warheads have an explosive power. One missile has an explosive power of about 5 tons of TNT. The solid warhead penetrates the ground and then detonates far underground so it can destroy any command and control center or missile silo. No NATO headquarters or command center is safe from these. So if we get to the point where Russia uses conventional warheads carried by Oreshniks, would the U.S. and NATO retaliate with nuclear weapons? So we've had recently, as was noted, President Trump threatened to move, he said, well, we're going to move our nuclear missile subs closer to Russia. Well, this was sort of downplayed because they said, well, missile subs are always out at sea. Well, they are, but if you move them closer to Russia, they can carry out a first strike in a few minutes. And this is an image of a missile being launched, a Trident D5 missile. We can launch, U.S. subs can launch these every 15 seconds. So they get in a position to fire, the missiles just come flying out. Now, each Trident II missile can carry 8 488 kiloton warheads or 12 90 kiloton warheads. As I mentioned before, they're limited to 3 or 4, but if Start 2 is a new Start is not renewed, then we will see, all these warheads piled back into the subs. So one sub can deliver 192 488 kiloton weapons to 288 90 kiloton weapons to the targets. This is a diagram that shows the depth of a crater with, the at our Capitol building there at the bottom for scale. That's what one 488 kiloton warhead can do. And we have 14 of these subs that can launch these missiles. And this is a diagram from a 1992 technical evaluation of depressed trajectory submarine launched ballistic missiles. And if you look at the lower line, which is 7.2 minutes, that's how long it takes for a Trident II missile to deliver a warhead over 1,000 nautical miles. So if you put a Ohio-class sub out in the Barents Sea, 1,100 miles away from Moscow, 250, 300 miles off the coast, it can hit Moscow in 7 minutes. So when Trump announces that he's going to move Ohio-class subs closer to Russia, that's what Russian war planners think. And the U.S. still have 800, and Russia have 800 to 1,000 strategic nuclear warheads they can launch in 5 to 15 minutes. If we manage to take out all our with the first strike, we take out all the Russian ICBM silos, because our Trident II D5s missiles have super fuses on the warheads now that make them super accurate. The Russians will still have their Oreshnik drone torpedo. And this is Dr. Postal again created this diagram. And this shows a 100 megaton warhead that's carried by this this 26-meter torpedo that goes faster than U.S. torpedoes, so it can't be intercepted. It can go thousands of miles, and it can loiter off the coast. So the Belgorod subs carry 6 of these. This is an image of one of them. They are deployed now, and they can put these subs off the U.S. coast. And this is an image of what a 100 megaton bomb could do. This is actually a 58 megaton bomb that Russia detonated in 1961. So Dr. Postal created an image. One detonation like that will create a nuclear firestorm that covers an area of 6,000 to 7,000 square miles. So if you have 5 of these off the northeastern coast of the U.S., it just basically just annihilates everything. So I want to leave President Kennedy with the last words on this subject, because I don't want us to think that there's no hope.
Never have the nations of the world had so much to lose or so much to gain. Together we shall save our planet, or together we shall perish in its flames. Save it we can, and save it we must. And then shall we earn the eternal thanks of mankind, and as peacemakers, the eternal blessing of God.
Well, thank you for your attention. And I do believe that there's still a very good chance we can avoid nuclear war if people come to their senses.